Welcome to Verbal Pick Radio, where we give you a verbal image of life. We are everyday people. Like to welcome y'all to the show. Like to thank everyone that sends me comments on the shows that we do on the YouTube page. I really appreciate you all commentary because this work is hard. As they say, Black history is American history. Well, really, Black history is world history. We can call it Black history. We can call it melanated history. We can call it indigenous history. We can call it the original man and woman of the planet Earth history. So much because it has to be highlighted. That's the thing that will equal a playing field and will dispel all the lies that was told in front of the coming of the Black man. You know, all the lies that was told upon the Black man, particularly in America. Basically, what is the focus? Blacks in America. But we want to get into not only Blacks in America, because Blacks in America are extensions of Blacks in Liberia, Nigeria, Japan, China, Mexico, Brazil, Portugal, Italy, where the Moors was. We're going to get into all of that. So, just hold on, because this is coming up in Black History Month. And we're getting started with dropping information. And as I always tell everybody, look, this show is not for everybody. I'm sorry. Verbal Pick Radio is a show that brings unique information. And those of you who follows and listens to this show, you will be smarter than anyone on the planet, because the teachers we bring, whether it be clips from Minister Farrakhan, one of the most brilliant, dynamic minds on this planet today, taught by the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, whether we bring you messages from Brother Gnosis, Brother Jamal, whether we talking to Low Key, whether Sister Pebbles is dropping wisdom and science, whether we're doing history on great figures such as Ganga Zumba or Gaspar Yanga or John Horse, or just so many different individuals, male and female, that has to be discussed. So today, another one, we got to discuss this, because see what we're doing now? What we're doing is we're bringing you up to speed, right? We're bringing you up to the Americas, but we starting with Portugal. After Portugal, we're getting more in depth into Spain, but we talk about the Moors in Spain so much that we don't focus on what actually took place in Portugal. What the Portuguese did by enslaving the Moors. The Moors was ruling over Spain and Portugal. And after that defeat in Granada in Spain, they started enslaving the Moors. Once they enslaved the Moors, they were still using the Moors as guides, man, as to guide their ships and to get them to go places. But they would they tricky. But look, they would offer the Moors the drink. They would offer them wine. They would offer them the white woman, their woman. They would offer the Moors things to where he was slave entitled, but they needed to explore. They needed to go places. The Moors was all over the planet, knowing where everything was at. They could take you to America. That's why Christopher Columbus had Moors on his ship. They can take you to Portugal. The Moors could take you to Japan. They can take you to Africa. They could take you anywhere on this globe where you wanted to go, because that history of the Moors goes all the way back, meaning melanated people. Moor is just another term for black. But that history goes all the way back to when, as Brother Cliff stated, when there was Pangea, and this was one landmass this globe before it split up, before some pieces sunk, before a lot of things happened, and we want to get exactly into that. This is about the black slaves in the 16th and 17th century in Japan. It was Nanban, what they called them, and when they was basically calling them black Europeans coming to. Because you have to realize the Moors ruled Europe as well, all through the Renaissance age. That's why King Arthur's Court, and you watch these movies, and you watch that first one with Morgan Freeman and what's the guy's name, man? About Robin Hood. Wow, his name is on the tip of my tongue, white guy. But anyway, that first Robin Hood with Morgan Freeman in it. And you will see that witch call him a Moor, and her magic wasn't working on him. But that goes into another story about the Moors and about wherever they brought the Moors into the Americas. They were putting them in. Well, no, not when they brought them into, but whenever they was capturing the Moors, when they was doing the slavery thing, catching the black indigenous, the Moors, and bringing the blacks into Africa, they was putting the Moors in places like Salem, wherever you saw Winston-Salem and this Salem and that Salem. That was Salam. That's where they was. That's where they rounded up the Moors and put them in, i.e., a camp. We'd say, you could say. So let's get on with it. This is coming from Dream of the Water Children, the Black Pacific. This is black slaves in the 16th, 17th century Japan, Nanban. The period of the Nanban, Southern barbarian in Japan, Nanban, from 1543 to 1614 is named such to mark the arrival of the first Europeans to Japan and the ensuing establishing of certain relations of power and culture. Now, when the Japanese saw these Moors, they wasn't shocked to say, "Oh man, look at black people now," because you got to realize that they were black. The first Japanese was black. They was just saying the different style, culture, and dress of these black Moors with these white Portuguese. Come on. The Portuguese arrived earlier in China and Southeast Asia. Of course, this was the period in the most recent memory of black bodies in Japan from the outside. You know, let me give you an example. That's like your hometown, your city, your block, your hood, right? You grew up in that hood, and all you knew was the people around you that went to your elementary school, that stayed on your street or around the corner or the street in front of you, the street behind you, but just within that community because you didn't do a lot of traveling, right? And then you got a visitor from Delaware, black people coming from Delaware into your town, into your block, your street, because they had relatives that you were a friend of, and so you met these black folks from Delaware when you were younger for the first time, and you heard the way that they speak and how they dress and the dances and they style and what they did. You saw that, damn man, you melanated like me. Hell, you look like me, but you talk different. You talking about snow. We don't get snow down here. You know what I mean? Where you come from? Who are you? What do y'all got going on? What are y'all doing? They bringing in new cultures. They bringing in new dances. New slangs. They wear their shoes with the laces this way, or they might wear this type of gear and this type of hat and whatnot. But they're different, but yet they're black. Okay, y'all get what I'm saying? Okay, let's go. They were the first bodies arriving in Japan from the outside. They arrived as slaves to the Portuguese and Spanish. then the British and Americans. The bodies were not only African, we think today, right? They're saying that these blacks that was coming to Portuguese, they all of them wasn't blacks from Africa. They was blacks from Brazil, could have been blacks from the Americas, meaning North America. Because you got to realize when you broaden your scope and you research history and you see what the Middle Easterners wrote about that time period, see what the Chinese wrote about that time period. You see what the Spanish wrote about that time period. And it all points back to when they arrived, everywhere they arrived, and they described the people. I don't care where they landed at, they described them as melanated beings, melanated people. Okay, there were black bodies as slaves that were not only from the African continent, but also Gujarati, Gujrati, South Asia, and Malaysia, as well, among others. Not only this, we must understand that from these places I just mentioned, there were different kind of black, different hues and heritage. Creole people, for instance, are an example of one kind among others. We must remember that there were black indigenous Asians as well, who were written about and depicted before the arrival of these slaves linked with the Europeans who lived in Southeast Asia, China, Taiwan, their present-day place names. What he's saying is, you all heard the story, and you heard the Honorable Elijah Muhammad state that the whole planet was called Asia at one time. So you got blacks coming from Southeast Asia, North Asia, Eurasia, black folks just everywhere. You're saying, you're thinking that all black people migrated out of Africa within the last 20,000 years, right? When black people could have left Africa 1,000,000 years ago, when the planet was one, Pangea, before the tectonic plates or the plate tectonics split and parts drifted, but we settled on each part. So when it did drift, we were still there. Some said, I'm staying over here. Some said, I'm going over there. Some said, well, look, I'm going to come see you in 10 years. They built the boat. And like you do today, like black folks do today, you might be living in Texas, but you got family members in New York. They pile up the car every so often, 4, 5, 10 years, and somebody to take the trip up to New York, somebody to take the trip from New York down to Texas. Visit their loved ones. Why? Because that melanin, first of all, that blood within family will yearn. It's a connection to where you got to go see your loved ones. Okay. Melanin is about the same as, put it like this, it could be 2 black people left on the planet, right? One could be in Africa, the other one could be way in Mexico. But they know each other exists, and one day they'll find a way to come to each other to communicate, to see what is what. Okay, let's keep going. And popular consciousness, trained by our national textbook and cultures, the black body has been portrayed in a variety of ways, including absent certain assumptions of nation, self-community, race, and ethnicity are often controlled by dominant forces of thinking, doing, and being, meaning that the narrative of black people is being controlled by people other than black. Okay. Black Asians have existed for centuries. Certain black persons may have come from other lands as traders and settlers before the arrival of the Nanban slave blacks. Most of these records are gone. Often, African nationalists would claim that all black people originated on the continent we now call Africa. People have forgotten that continents have changed, sunk, shifted, arisen through time. The search for single and reduced origins is a modern invention of the mind. It is problematic when we attempt to work with diversity and social justice today. In thinking these thoughts on the pad, on the in thinking these thoughts on this post, I want to point to the slave trade. The image of African slaves and the history of blackness today is often dominantly portrayed through the lens of a black Atlantic slave trade. Paul Gilroy's writings and thought are important on this topic. However, there lies the open diversity of other spaces, places, times outside the reality and timeline, experience, and identity in their diversity. The Black Pacific holds a mirrored history. It is another way of translating a counter-memory to the ideal of a Pacific or Asia, which by its naturalizing forms leave out the fact that we are talking most often about the white Pacific. The Portuguese slaves were not what people commonly think of when thinking of slave. The image of the black Atlantic slave trade, the series Roots in the United States and other books depict a singular kind of slaves in chattel and loincloth toiling. This is real. I do not say that it does not exist as real in history, but what I'm saying is that there were and are many, many different kinds of slaves. The slaves that arrived in Japan were not only work horses of heavy labor. Some were clerics, translators, interpreters, guides. Some spoke Japanese and perhaps other Asian language fluently. From the accounts I have read, some of the slaves were well respected and the Japanese took kindly to them. This is part of the ideal of blackness in Japan's history. It is different from how blackness arrives in consciousness in the United States or Germany or in Kenya or South Africa, India, and Sri Lanka. It also challenges pervasive notions of natural and essentialized notions of a universal Asian racism against black racism is learned. Black guides helped Commodore Perry when he arrived at Japan to guide him to the current places and people. It is also known that when the Americans, like Commodore Perry, arrived in Japan, they first went to Okinawa. The Okinawans are not Japanese. Japanese colonized the Ryukyu Islands, Okinawa, but while Commodore Perry traveled to the Japanese islands from Okinawa, one of his men raped an Okinawan girl. The locals then murdered that man. Black slaves that were at his later revenge event apparently did not stop it. What is also true is that the Japanese saw how the Portuguese, Spanish, British, and Americans treated the black bodies. This then puts a first initial stamp into the people of the Japanese island, traveling mostly by stories and rumors across Japan as to how whites treated blacks. They were not quarantined, although it is written that there were slaves' quarters in Japan, and it can be imagined that there might have been offspring born of relationships between some of the Japanese women. More research needs to be done. Yada yada yada, la 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 la, bada bada, bing 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 bing. What I'm saying is that melanin black people from Japan been in Japan even before the Portuguese brought this Nanban, what they deemed them blacks, to Japan to show the diversity of black people all over this globe. This is Black History 101. What I'm saying is you got family all over this planet. Look, your great grandfather and the one before that, okay, and great grandfather, right? Some were Moors, some was pirates, some were on ships, some traveled from different continents, some met the women all over this globe, some had children from these women, which would make them your distant cousins, now your relatives. You over there sitting there looking at a Nigerian, or you looking at a black Chinese and look at him and not knowing you could be dissing your own family member. You could be dissing your own cousin and not even know it. That's how screwed up they had black people, not just in America, because we didn't learn about the native black Brazilians in school. We didn't learn about the native blacks in Veracruz, Mexico, who they catching so much hell in Veracruz with racism. We didn't know about these people, you know. And then we were ashamed, a lot of us, if you didn't have strong parents who always talked, said loud and black and I'm proud, then a lot of us was ashamed to identify with being black. You call somebody, what's up, black man? I ain't black. Who you talking to? Or they get upset because they don't want to fit the stereotype that the colonizer put out in their media against the black man or the black woman. You can go all the way back to the movie Birth of a Nation, which was one of the most damaging films written. But I understand why it was written. It was written for a purpose. And it did its job. It helped promote black inferiority. It was created to hype up or to make blacks feel ashamed of who they were. It made some of these movies were made to make black folks walk with their head down in shame because that media seemed so real. But we didn't realize it depict that person, that writer who was behind the movie to create that psychological effect, you know, and it did its job. You know what I mean? They were great at what they were doing. You know, you was dealing, like the minister say, you was dealing with a master manipulator. Had a skill in trick knowledge. Had a skill in doing tricks. A skill in manipulation. You know, hell, you couldn't defeat it. I mean, it spread it throughout. You even had Africans, black Africans, who act like they was afraid of black America from what they seen in the movies. You know, and then some black writers was like, "Hey, man, look, black folks killing black folks cells. We're gonna make a movie where another black person gonna scatter his brains all over the car seat and all over the pavement, and you know what I mean. They wanted to depict that. That's the life. That's the image, you know, that they wanted to put out. All in the rap music. Y'all saw the post we did where the white guy was saying, "Hey, man, damn, y'all won't put anything positive about black people in their raps, but if it's something negative and killing, the major record companies, they love putting that out there unless they talk about the Caucasian or somebody white." You know what I mean? But that's how it goes, though. You know, it's ridiculous.